Okay, everybody, let's give this another shot. I tried to live stream last night, and a big storm came through, and the internet was choppy, and my connection was bad, and everything was bad. And now I'm going to make everything good by streaming again here at 9:50 in the morning. Um, and I'm going to be doing specifically rant requests. On patreon.com/goldenwitchfire, you can pay me $5 or more to rant about whatever you want. And I am. Let me make sure that this stream is in fact live really quick. I do believe. Oh, it's not. Okay, that's the problem. It's not public. Okay, now it is public. Cool. So, on this stream, I am going to be ranting about everything that I was paid to rant about by my patrons. Um, basically, and I'm also going to be catching up on the Moe and the Guro. Uh, when I did episode 3 of the Moe and the Guro, there were a bunch of super chats that I didn't get to read because of the fact that I was reading them on a mobile phone, I mean to say, and the chat only goes back so far on mobile, so I couldn't check up on all the stuff from like the beginning of the stream. And on desktop, you can go back through like every super chat you've ever gotten, so it's no problem. I'm just gonna make a tweet really quick. Live streaming rants. Link below. So yeah, in the description, I will be time coding where each rant begins eventually. But hello to people coming into the chat. This is my special rant catch-up stream. So we're gonna start with the stuff that I missed on the Moe and the Guro episode 3. Just these super chats that I had missed because I feel bad that people made super chats and then didn't get to have any kind of rant about it, even though that's the deal. So let's see which ones. I know I answered some of these. Some of these sound familiar to me, and I know I ranted about them already. But let's see. Moe and the Guro episode 3. Because somebody had said to rant about the announcement of Fooly Cooley seasons 4 and 5, Fooly Cooley Grunge and Shoegaze, and also about how DeMarco said he wanted to make Fooly Cooley sequels forever. I think I ranted about this already, but I know it's interesting to some people. Just generally, I am not a fan of Fooly Cooley sequels. I didn't like alternative, or no, it was progressive. I had a video slamming that one, and some people have said that it's good and I was not being fair. Maybe I'll give it another shot or try the other sequels just for the sake of talking about them because people are going to be curious what I have to say. But, if it ends up being miserable, I might not put myself through too much of it because I don't enjoy hating things, especially not sequels to shows that I loved. But yeah, that was for Art Makes Us Better. Your Online Lover said, can we get a rant about shonen anime, the good, the bad, and the ugly? Shonen is near and dear to me because I grew up with Shonen Jump magazine when I was like 12, 13. The American release of it, the monthly Shonen Jump. And that was what got me into Naruto pretty heavily, and more than anything, it just like introduced me to manga as a concept. Like I had been a big anime fan for like a year by that point without even having heard of manga. So it was like mind-blowing to me to realize that so much of the anime I'd been enjoying was actually, based on manga as a source material. And I just like missed out. It felt like such a obvious and like core piece of information about anime that it was like shocking to me to not realize that it existed. I don't feel like that would happen to anybody these days. I feel like anime and manga are both like just common things that like people know about, or at the very least you're more likely to find out about both. Maybe not. I guess it really depends on your age, because you can only really find out about either one once. So maybe it hasn't changed like that. Some people just will find out about it later. But yeah, that was my experience. Was Shonen Jump made me realize that manga existed, and then I was I liked Shaman King a lot, but I always kind of wanted all of the manga I liked to become anime, and so when the anime was disappointing for a lot of them, it made me lose interest retroactively in the manga, because it was like if I was reading the manga with the expectation that it would like translate into some badass anime, and then the anime is a disappointment, then it feels like, oh well, like all the build up I had in my mind has been for nothing, you know. I think there's a lot of people who maybe aren't as into manga who feel that, like, who get into manga in the anticipation of whether or not it's going to become a cool anime, and then like have that disappointment. um but now I sort of take manga as its own art form, and I'm a lot less likely to hold it against a good manga to have a bad anime, you know, especially because a lot of those shonen manga are way better than their anime adaptations. It's really hard to keep animation consistently good for like hundreds of episodes, for instance. And you know, I'm reading the chat saying fully coolly progressive is not good. Alternative is better, but it's going from a 1 out of 10 to a 4. I know I've heard either you have said this in my comments before, or I've heard someone else say this before. But yeah, that seems to be the take, is that it's better but still not like not a disappointment. But I suppose I'll have to find out sometime myself. I mostly have been talking about the good of shonen, the bad and ugly. The ugly is the anime adaptations. Like shonen, not that all of them are bad, and like a lot of them are getting better. Obviously, we're in sort of like a golden age of like really high quality shonen adaptations, because of the fact that like at this point it's sort of a sure thing that like these are going to be long-term successes. And while like One Piece is lucky that it has like that people will still watch the whole anime, like I'm somebody who gave up like 45 episodes into the anime because it just looked so much uglier than the manga. And like there are parts of the anime that look great, and I think a lot of people are probably going to see that stuff before they ever watch the rest of the show. Like they're going to see some badass fights or something, and they're going to go into it like thinking of it as a show that looks great, and then kind of gloss over the times where it just looks like total ass. But the point is that the manga never looks like ass. The manga always looks great. And you know, that's more consistently true with a lot of manga. But again, that's I can't say that's always the case, because Hunter x Hunter you know, devolves into scribbles at times, and the anime fully realized all that stuff. So, you know, can't always hate on the anime adaptations. But yeah, anyway, that's all for that rant. Vash the Fox. Oh, this was a request for a movie review of Let the Right One In, which ended up being fulfilled by Mint Salad over on Mint Salad Saw on the ASE Presents channel. So yeah, if you go over there, you'll see the review that Vash bought from Mint through Super Chat. Mr. Graphicsable with $5 in GBP, or £5. I guess that's pound, right? Great Britain pound. Rant about half of the conventional wisdom not applying all of a sudden, and how most aren't ready / don't know how to think of original ways of living. I think I might have done this rant on that stream, but I find the phrasing of it so interesting. How half the conventional wisdom doesn't apply all of a sudden. I just don't think conventional wisdom ever applied. Or rather, conventions of wisdom are constantly changing. So like I don't know what is considered, like there are some wisdoms that are like as old as time. There's like aphorisms that go way back that have always held up. But is that what we think of as conventional wisdom? I'm not sure. And those things I think will always, like there's certain, like most of what Sun Tzu said, you know, will always apply. So if you can't think, I mean, I don't think anyone has ever really been able to think of original ways of living. You know, the very nature of adaptation and evolution is such that you try to copy things that work. It is human nature to copy things that work. So, original ways of living, I guess would be like what I do, but that's like a marginal change from things that I already knew worked. So I still see that as like a fairly traditional evolution, I guess. Almost every ancient culture had some form of the golden rule. Yeah, it's just like some stuff is just obvious, like, and probably always will be. All right. MNNM had said, "Sup, rant about long-ass story arcs. Why do shonen writers like them so much? What elements make them bearable? By the way, the current One Piece arc is closing in on 150 chapters with mixed opinions." I mean, I think that making those long-ass arcs is, like, kind of part of the point. I mean, why do they like them so much? It keeps the book going forever. Like, depending on how much well, not even how much they like it, I would say that, like, your goal as especially a shonen author, and the goal of Shonen Jump magazine itself, is that every story is supposed to last as long as fucking possible. It's supposed to just last for as long as the audience continues to be engaged with it, and if you can make a story arc that people are still actively reading and, like, they're getting hyped for it, then you have every incentive to stretch it out longer and keep, dragging people along through as much of it as you can. Obviously, if you fuck it up and you make the story boring, then that means that you failed. But if you are capable of stretching it longer and longer and longer, and people are still reading, that would always be the ideal way to handle, like, a long form story or any kind of, like, major franchise, which is the trend that they all take. Is towards less and less content, more and more time. But it's all about, like, them sort of finding their core base and, like, burning away anybody who wouldn't want to just spend as much time with the thing as possible. So, like, in the case of One Piece, people who love One Piece, they love it, like, in absence of everything else. Like, you talk to someone like Best Guy Ever, like, he does read a lot of, like, Shonen Jump manga, but the obsession with One Piece is so much deeper. Like, there's not nearly the level of thought being put into anything else being consumed as compared to One Piece, So, like, that's what allows stories like that to get away with that, is that, like, the fans just care that much and will let it happen. And they might bitch about it not being... Well, mostly they just complain about the fact that it takes so long because everyone's afraid they're going to die before the story's over. Like, everybody's afraid that, like, it's just never going to end. Either the author's going to die, or you're going to die, or you're going to be in a different emotional place. You're not going to be the same person. You're not going to be able to keep caring long enough. It's literally commitment. You have to have commitment. And a lot of people really lack commitment. So, if I caught up on Bleach once, and the experience of reading Bleach, it is cinematic. It's written cinematically. So when you read every chapter back to back, sometimes the chapters take, like, fucking 2 minutes to read because it's just action scenes happening. And when you read, like, 22 chapters of Bleach back to back in the span of, like, an hour, and it feels like you just watched a movie, then it's really fucking cool. But when you get it in, like, tiny little pieces over the course of weeks, it just feels like such a fucking slog. But every time you go back and read through it again, you realize that it is perfectly paced. Like, it's all written in a way to be read at once. It's just that piecemeal delivery drains on how much you care unless you are really thinking about it or really going back through it. So it does take that kind of, like, level of fandom, that level of actually giving a fuck, and for a story to understand that its audience has that level of that, for it to be able to pull off that shit. So I think if a manga can have a 150 chapter story arc, it means that it is a fucking legendary manga that is never going to be forgotten by the people who actually read it. That would be my take. And to people in the chat, I'll remind everybody, right now I'm reading super chats from the Moe and the Guro episode 3 that I had missed before because I've been doing it on my phone. And after that, I'm going to be going through my Patreon rant requests. So anybody who gives me $5 or more on Patreon, is able to get a rant. These are the rants for July, the ones people paid for in July. So if you sign up now, you'll get a rant for August, and it'll be covered in a live stream at the end of August. Um, but yeah, if you super chat during this live stream with a rant request, $5 and more, I will cover it at the end after I've gotten through everybody else's rants that they've already been waiting for. Anyway, let's see if there's anything else from the Moe Guru. The Mr. Grafixable with £5 said, rant about personality tests. They all suck. With all this public interest in psychology that they can't think of something better than horoscopes. I mean, I kind of agree. I don't think MBTI is like the worst. I think that the way that people react to it, the way that it's used culturally is awful. Like when people take it seriously and make decisions based off of it. I think people take all that stuff way too literally. Horoscopes, I have never read into what is considered to be, I don't know, more legitimate or less legitimate of horoscopes. But in my mind, there is obvious reasons for there to be some logic behind when you were born dictating some element of how you act. And if you've ever read the book Outliers, it gives some great reasonings for stuff like that, such as like how, actually using myself as an example, I was born August 8th. My birthday's coming up in a week, and that's part of why I'm going to be vlogging every single day this month, because I'm turning 31 and there's 31 days in August, so I'll be doing 31 videos. And because I was born in August, my birthday falls right before the cutoff of this. Okay, so when you start school, when you start kindergarten, if you are 5 years old on August 8th, then you are one of the youngest people in your class, because the cutoff is like you have to turn 5 before September 29th in order to get in for that school year. So the youngest you could possibly be to be in a class would be being born actually on my brother Shade's birthday. Although I think he started school the next year. I'll have to ask him about that because I don't remember. But in my case, like, I was the youngest and smallest kid in most of my classes. Now, when I read Outliers, I was shocked to realize how much of a disadvantage I had been at. And I was the one who said I wanted to start school that year because I felt like I was intelligent and like I would be fast tracking myself. But actually, if I had just waited until I was 6, I would have been bigger and smarter than most of the kids in class, and I would have had all the advantages every single year. And this really manifests itself in sports, especially. Like, kids whose birthdays are right after the cutoff almost always tend to do the best in sports. Like, there's like a way overabundance of, like, it's unbalanced how many kids end up on that side of the scale. So, like, stuff like that makes me think that there is some legitimacy to the concept of horoscopes, even if most of the horoscopes that actually exist are terrible and don't mean anything and are just made up out of ether. But personality tests, similarly, there's definitely logic behind a lot of them. But yeah, most of them suck. I don't know about all, but most suck. And that's it for the catch-up, I think. No, wait. There's one more. Anton Nielsen. Hey, Trixie, have you ever played or heard of the Trails, Not Tales series? Really amazing, ambitious JRPG series. I think it would be down your alley. I have not. I've heard a lot of people really enjoy those games. They seem a bit much for me. I know there's like lots to keep track of with like NPCs all have their own schedules and stuff, and I don't know. I don't tend to like games that force me to keep track of lots of shit. I like games where I can just like run around and hit stuff with a big sword. So, yeah. All right, that's it for those catch-up rants from a previous live stream. Now we're going to move on to doing Patreon requested rants. So, I had already answered Josh's rant request with its own video about tracing the lineage of my favorite anime. You can go check that out elsewhere on the channel. But moving on from there, Affirmakosh, something like that. Can you rant about copyright law? Do you think copyright law should be changed? And if so, how would you like the law to work instead? You know, the thing about copyright law is that the way the law is actually written, like, is meant to defend a lot of, like, parody and fair use type of stuff that, like the reason I run into a lot of problems with copyright is not because of the law, it's because of the way that YouTube is terrified of having to deal with the law, of having to, like, spend the money to enter the court to prove that, they're not breaking the rules of copyright law. Because, like, again, like when I've looked at what cases have lost, like, copyright disputes, there are some bullshit ones. I was actually just thinking about Blurred Lines because this came up in Pharrell was getting interviewed by Rick Rubin, and he was talking about how ridiculous he thought it was that Pharrell lost the suit because his song was just, like, not the same song as the one that he was being accused of ripping off. It was just, like, a similar vibe and kind of idea, but not even close to being as similar as lots of music is that is released and it doesn't have court cases about it. So there are sometimes really shocking cases of copyright law. And I do think it's mostly just, like, a weapon that Disney wields to make it so people won't sell off-brand stuff of their characters. But, like, that's also why they've been able to grow into the ridiculously massive corporation that they are, is, like, the crazy stranglehold they have on their IP. But at the same time, I think that, like, remix and plunder culture and just the nature of, like, the way modern consumers are, that, like, we tend to pirate or to consume things without really thinking about where even the source is that we're getting it from, has led to everything getting way bigger than ever before. Like, piracy, meme culture, though there's rampant availability of stuff, has made all stuff more popular. It's just made everybody more into stuff conceptually. And so the market is just way the fuck bigger than it ever was before. So, like, I think that a lot of the perspective is shifting on copyright law, where now it's sort of being seen as, like, this back pocket thing where it's like companies kind of want you to go out and, like, use their stuff in technically illegal ways or, like, without permission because it's good promotion. But as soon as you do something that might start costing them money or that could be mistaken for their product and they don't want it to be mistaken for their product, that's when they start cracking down, and especially if the fan product or whatever it is gets to a certain level of notoriety. And that's all really unfortunate, because I do think, like, derivative works that aren't literally the product should be considered different products. Like, I guess my biggest problem is with, like, trademark and intellectual property, where it's like you can't use the name of something. I think there's no real reason we should be allowed to be so precious about names of things. Like, if I draw a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic that isn't literally traced from another Ninja Turtles comic, that's an original comic. And I don't really see any reason that I should have to pay royalties to, like, the concept of the Ninja Turtles that happens to be owned by some company or person, like, I understand why this seems more clear-cut when someone just makes something and owns it and then, like, is directly competing with other people, but almost no one who's, like, independently owns their IP gives a fuck to protect it to that degree, unless it's, like, I don't know, the guy who made Cool Cat, and everyone makes fun of him for that. So, like, it's certainly not the popular cultural position to be, like, an independent creator that is gonna shit on everybody who, like, rips off your content in any way. So, like, the only people who are giving such a big fuck are like major corporations that, uh, you know, that would probably stand to benefit from having you create your own Ninja Turtle comic, but they want control over it. They just don't want you to dilute their brand in any way. And I don't know if I think that's something they should be allowed. Like that's a decision they should be allowed to make. So yeah, I guess I have complicated feelings about copyright law. Probably could be debated with more nuance, but it's hard for me to really know where I need to justify my statements without someone to like debate with me about it, you know? All right, I'm going to move along. The next request is from Marcus. July 4th, 2022, rant request from Marcus. Rant about my Mal anime list. All right, let's go over to Marcus's Mal. I'm going to change my desktop view here real quick. Display capture. There we go. Make myself tiny so we can go review this Mal. All right. So it's organized by score. That's helpful. The 12 Kingdoms. I have not finished this show. I watched like 8 episodes of it in 2007, and at the time I was really not interested in anything like political. I wasn't that into high fantasy and stuff, so this was kind of going over my head. The review here says best world building I've ever seen. I've heard that a lot. A lot of people have talked up the world building in this show. I mostly remember the main character and her being sort of an emo. I would like to revisit this show. It's high on the list of like stuff I feel like I missed out on that I would probably enjoy now. And the woman who wrote the book also wrote Shiki, which is an anime. Well, she wrote the book Shiki, but the anime is also really great. Boogie Pop Phantom with a 10 says the aesthetic is super cool. Story is not bad either. That seems like a kind of middling review for something you gave a 10 out of 10 to, but Boogie Pop Phantom's pretty cool. I'm a much bigger fan of the books. The show is more horror, I would say, and it's fun. It's more fun. It's more fun and more nerve-wracking and scary than the book. It also has a phenomenal soundtrack that I've listened to countless times. So yeah, do recommend. Everybody should check out Boogie Pop Phantom, regardless of whether you read the books. The animes, I saw it before I read the books anyways. Digimon with a 10. Interesting. The ending made me cry even as an adult, it says in the tags. I reviewed Digimon for Anime Alphabet, and you know I appreciate a lot the deeper themes and messages in Digimon. A lot of the show is sort of like monster of the week fighting, more like on the childish side, stuff that like didn't appeal to me as consistently. Like watching Digimon was sort of like every once in a while I was like, oh shit, this is kind of interesting, and then I'd kind of like not be that into it for a while, but because there are 54 episodes. But I do think that what's there is really good, or what's good that's there is really good. For me, it's like a 7 out of 10, probably, maybe like a 6. Infinite Revias with a 10. It says my third favorite anime is the review. This show is great. It's fucking really dramatic and harrowing. It's Lord of the Flies in space, just a bunch, well, with like bunch of teenagers, cadets get left behind by all the adults on a ship, and they have to fend for themselves, and it doesn't go so well. Shadow Star Narutaru is also a 10 here. It says my favorite edgy anime for the review. I have not finished this. Actually, I haven't seen any of the show. I was reading the manga. The author of this, his name is slipping my mind. Where is it? It should be listed here on Mal. Whatever. The author of Narutaru is one of my favorite manga authors because they also did Bokurano, and that was also a very disturbing, very sexually charged, dramatic, dark manga that I really liked. Narutaru I got 2 volumes into before finding out, because I was buying it physically, that the English publication never actually reached the end of the manga, and that made me really upset. And then the anime also doesn't come anywhere close to the end of the manga, so I've always felt like that would be the way to go, would be to read the manga. But it's kind of one of those things where I know I'm going to like it, so I don't feel too much of a rush to finish it, because I like there being things I know I'm going to like that are still on my plate. Baccano's here with a 10, the ultimate payoff anime, my second favorite. You know, I kind of agree with you. I think that Baccano is a magic trick that only really works the first couple times, because a lot of the show is actually kind of boring and doesn't really matter. Like, when you see all the plot threads come together the first time, it is like, holy fuck, I can't believe that, like, all this was so intertwined. But, like, when you go back through the show, especially with the mindset of knowing that it's adapting 4 books, and that it's like, book 1 is the story of, like, the immortals and how everything got set off, and then book 2 and 3 are the 2 books on the train, telling the story of, like, the 2 different sects of characters, and then book 4 is the stuff with the guy who gets drowned in the river or whatever, and that stuff in particular really sucks, in my opinion. Like, everything to do with is it the Genoards, I think? Like, everything to do with that family is just not that interesting. And I don't know, like, again, it really is just like 4 stories that are being told at the same time, and they all just kind of end, they're all brought to an end at the same time, but there's not actually that much interweaving of the stories. They're just being mixed up in how they're told. I guess, like, if you're thinking about it chronologically while you watch it, it seems less interesting. So yeah, I still think Baccano's like an 8 out of 10. I just don't think it's the ultimate payoff anime. I have to think harder about what I do think is the ultimate payoff anime. I mean, I never finished The Great Pretender, and I've heard the ending's not good, but that one had some great payoffs in the early part. Angel Beats is here with a 10. It says, anything that makes me cry is an automatic 10. I strongly disagree with that notion myself. I think being able to make me cry just proves that something is good at being manipulative, and not necessarily that it's good. But Angel Beats is great, and it did make me cry a lot, so I appreciate this. Magical Warfare with a 10. This ending did things to me I never knew I wanted. Well, now I'm really curious about how Magical Warfare ends, because I remember this being a show no one watched or talked about or liked. It's got a 5.9 on Mal. I'm really curious how that show ends now. And then you gave a 10 to Makia, When the Promised Flower Blooms. It says, made you cry more than Angel Beats. I did not make it through that movie. I don't know what it was. I wasn't enjoying it, but I have heard good things about it. I might give it another shot. I didn't hate it. I just wasn't really into it. That's all I'm going to say about this Mal, because that's all the 10s, and I've already talked about it for a while. But pretty fun. Pretty eclectic list of 10s there. Not too predictable, so I like that. All right, Nick Angel says, hey, Trixie, I enjoyed your 3x3 rant, so rant about my 5x5. If it's too much, you can focus mainly on the middle squares, which are my 3x3. Oh, don't worry, we'll go through the whole bloody thing. Let's look at this thing. Can I make it larger? There we go. Okay, we've got Wolf's Rain. Good show, very pretty, amazing Yoko Kanno soundtrack. Rest in peace to... oh man, her name is slipping my mind. The woman who wrote Cowboy Bebop and created Wolf's Rain. And she died at the end of last year. Nobumoto Keiko. Rest in peace to her. My frame rate is low, but the audio is fine. That's cool with me. Let's see. My FPS is... choppy. I gotta stop screen sharing. Okay. No more display capture. We're going back to just me. Hopefully that'll fix it. Alright. So, Wolf's Rain, yeah. Tragic loss. Tragic show. Dark, sad show, for sure. The next on this 3x3 is Gundam 00, which I have not seen, but it has a scene where the main character, Setsuna F. Seiei, says, I am Gundam. And I really want to see what he meant by that. It's something I quote every day of my life. So as far as I'm concerned, that show's a 10 out of 10 just by existing. Code Geass, Lelouch the Rebellion, great show, very fun. I actually never finished the second season because I was watching it while it was airing and fell behind. But I know what happens because it was all the rage on 4chan at the time. This is Hayate the Combat Butler. I actually was really in love with this show when it first started, but it quickly got old for me. Just the sense of humor didn't hold up. Going back to it, it hasn't aged that well visually either. It was probably the first show I really liked Rie Kugimiya in at the time when she was like at the height of her popularity doing all the tsundere characters, but she was the one I liked. Probably because she's the one I relate to. Angel Beats, we just talked about. It's a good show. The next one on this 3x3, I do not know what it is. It looks like some light novel trash. I'll turn on screen sharing for just 1 second here. Let me put it over top of me. All right, this right here. I do not know what this is, but it does not look good. I'm just saying. Next up is Gintama, which is phenomenal. It's an anime that is everything. It's been every genre and every convention. It's perfect. Fullmetal Alchemist is pretty great. Got an anime alphabet video with all my thoughts on that. Assassination Classroom I've not watched. I do want to cover that when I do the shonen round of anime alphabet, because the concept of anime alphabet is that when I reach the end of it, it just loops back around and I do it again, but with a concept this time. And one of them is going to be shonen, so I'll talk about that then. Gundam Unicorn is in here. I've seen the first half of it and I really liked it. I would love to finish it sometime. Konosuba's in here. Phenomenally funny show. I really like it. Kill La Kill, one of my favorites. I'm ensconced in Kill La Kill posters and t-shirts and shit. And right next to it on this 5x5 rather is Casshern Sins, which I believe I've said before that I think Kill La Kill and Casshern Sins are like the two best looking TV anime ever, in my opinion. They're both just nonstop gorgeous to look at. Revolutionary Girl Utena's in here. That's also really beautiful to look at. Crazy show. I would love to cover that for Anime Alphabet as well. We've got Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans. Lots of love for alternate century Gundam in this list, and new Gundam as well. Although there's also some old Gundam, because the classic, I think this probably represents the film trilogy, or the third film specifically, is in here. Technolize, which I love. Brutal, dark, nihilistic fucking tragedy. That's the show I watch when I really, 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 really don't feel like living. That's like the darkest place you can go to. Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex rules. Madoka Magica rules. We got Beating Angel Dokuro-chan on here, which is a crazy, violent OVA that was well known in the early 2000s. I've only seen a little bit of it. It wasn't my sense of humor at the time, but maybe it would be now. Tsubasa Reservoir Chronicle. Interesting. I've never really heard great things about that show. But here it is on a favorites list. Heartcatch Precure, which rules. I've seen, I think, 20 episodes of that. And that's another one of those where it's like, it's so delightful to watch that I don't feel any like need to finish it or like I could just go back and rewatch the first episode over and over again and still be happy. You know, like I don't feel like I need to see the whole thing, but I'm sure I will eventually. Dr. Stone is really cool. Great shonen series. I think this next one is Puni Puni Poemi, which is a really funny little 2-episode OVA. And Dororo, the new Dororo. I've read the Dororo manga, and that anime is so different in every way that I felt like I needed to like wait a few years until I've forgotten the manga before I could enjoy it, because like it just was like, wow, these are not the characters, so I'm gonna have to get used to that. I'm gonna see what you guys are talking about here in chat real quick. Looks like I fixed everything with the frame rate. But Kanazuki no Miko, there are people who really love that show. I had watched the first 2 episodes and really hated it at the time. I know it's very controversial. That's one I would love to watch to talk about it, but it just isn't popular enough still. My thoughts on Kill La Kill. I'll tell you what, I have a lot of Kill La Kill videos on this channel, so just go ahead and search Yig Studio Kill La Kill, and you'll get some in-depth stuff. All right, let's move on to the next rant. Okay. I'm going to rant about Star Wars Visions for Cameron Sanderson. On the way to being able, because they asked about Star Wars The Clone Wars initially. And I've only seen the original Genndy Tartakovsky Clone Wars, which was like ultra short series from like 2003, but just gorgeous to look at and definitely influential over the way that like the more serious like Star Wars animations are going to be done from that point forward. It also like won a Grammy. That's the one. No, Emmy. No. Yeah, Emmy, right? Yeah, that's the one for TV. I really liked that when I was younger because I was a huge Genndy Tartakovsky fan. And then more recently, we had Star Wars Visions, which is probably the closest it's come to. Well, it's literally anime. Like that other one came close to being anime. This one's actually anime. But it's a similar project to like the Animatrix and everything that's copied that, of being like a compilation of shorts by different studios and directors, all within the universe of an existing story. And the Star Wars one is like, I'm not a huge Star Wars like fan or aficionado, so it's hard for me to say how good it is as a Star Wars property. But it made me more interested in a lot of the like weirder ancillary aspects of Star Wars, because like to me what makes Star Wars interesting is all of the extra shit. Like categorically there's tons and tons like of people who just are like, oh, only the movies matter. And on top of that, people who are like, only the original trilogy matters, because they don't like where the story was taken in the prequels or in the sequels. And I am more interested in thinking like, well, it seems like the lore that actually makes sense and has any kind of consistency that you can follow is like the video games. Like the only time that Star Wars ever seems to fucking make any sense is when they put it into a video game, or like books that eventually get compiled into Wikipedia articles that kind of make sense, you know? But like trying to consume Star Wars as like, especially as a film series, you just won't learn anything about fucking Star Wars. So like Star Wars Visions felt much closer to that experience of like playing the video games or like looking at Wikipedia articles where you learn all this crazy lore and all this stuff that actually sounds interesting, you know, that isn't communicated by the films all that well. So yeah, so I would say, I wouldn't even say I'm a Star Wars EU fan because I haven't consumed that much of it. I just think it is innately more interesting. Like, I think that the fact that someone took, basically, it's like you have the original films and they didn't really make a whole lot of sense, even just like in between the three of them. Like a lot of stuff was retconned and changed up, and like not that much thought had been put into making a rational universe. It was a bunch of cool fantasy ideas. And then people went and turned that into a rational, consistent universe that does make sense and would have had longevity. And then George Lucas ignored all that and made prequels that just convoluted things even further. And then Disney ignored all that and made sequels that convoluted things even further. And so, like, if you look at those 9 movies, it doesn't look like Star Wars has any sensical continuity whatsoever. But if you look at Star Wars the franchise, and again, like, read wikis and play the Old Republic or whatever, it's like just a totally different story. It seems like a cohesive narrative that has some kind of thought put into it, even if it doesn't totally make sense, so to speak. But like, it's a different kind of not making sense. So I find Visions interesting in that way, that it's like simultaneously you got stuff like the first short that's like basically multiverse, like a just an alternate universe take on the concept of Star Wars. And then you've got stuff that could fit into the narrative, anywhere, like any piece. I guess that's the other fascinating part, is that even though the films like contradict each other and don't make sense internally, the attempt to make them make sense by all the outside material means that, like, anything that gets added to the Star Wars canon does make sense in most of it. It only breaks in certain places, like, it'll be like, well, this could have happened in any of the movies except that this thing happens in this movie that contradicts it. But if you ignore that, then this all makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I'd have to consume a lot more EU Star Wars before I could really get a sense of how much of it is consistent with each other. But watching Visions made me feel like I was in the Star Wars universe in a way that watching the movies doesn't always necessarily make me feel. All right, we've got another Mal list to comment on. This one is from Insight Zoidberg, asking me to rant about their Mal. So let's go through it. We're going to look at the favorites list. It starts with K-On! Obviously, I am strongly in support of this favorite because it's one of my favorite anime, and I've defended it very staunchly throughout the history of my channel. I also appreciate, I'm going to put this on screen for just a moment once again, just so you can see the profile picture here, because it's a really cute picture of Sharo from Is the Order a Rabbit, and she is best girl, and she is adorable. The profile just says, contrary to popular belief, I do in fact still watch anime. I accept any and all friend requests. Hey, that's also true of me. I accept all friend requests on my anime list. I'm not logged in right now, but if I was, you would see that I have... How many friends do I have on here? Where does it show the friends list? Here we go. 6,712 friends on my anime list. So yeah, find me _golden_witch. Anyway, yeah, K-On! Rules. This is... The Cat Returns is the second one here. Fascinating. I have not seen that movie. It's one of the few Ghibli films I still haven't seen yet, and I've never seen it on a favorites list before. So that's interesting. Like, sometimes I will not be interested in watching a movie until a moment like this, where, like, it's like, if somebody's like, this is my second favorite thing ever after K-On!, then I'm like, well, okay, now I want to know why. Like, what made this so special to you? Anyway, next up is the Haruhi movie, which is great. I haven't seen that since fucking 2010 or so, so I don't really remember the actual plot. I just remember, like, a couple of very vivid images. Laputa, Castle in the Sky. Not one of my favorite Ghibli movies. I do respect it a lot. I think the imagery in the end is iconic, unforgettable. But not my favorite story. Toradора's here, and His and Her Circumstances. Pretty much the 1-2 punch of, like, the best high school rom-com shows. Like, just the most heartwarming portraits of two people coming together to make each other's lives better through conflict and interpersonal drama. And they're both so fucking good and sweet and kind-hearted and make you want to love. That's the main thing I get out of them. Dead Leaves is the most badass animation showcase pretty much ever. It's my go-to if I had to pick a, like, I just want to see crazy shit for 30 minutes. This is the one. Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann is here. I love it. I've talked about it plenty over the years. Koe no Katachi, or A Silent Voice. I remember thinking this movie was really great, and I saw it in theater, but it didn't, like, hit me the way I expected it to, I guess. I need to rewatch it. It's one I definitely want to see again. And then we've got Eva 2.0, You Cannot Advance. Interesting. I'm curious if this person has gotten around to the fourth movie yet. Because I could understand there was a long period of time where, like... Because I really loved Eva 2.0 when it came out. I was like, this is fucking incredible. And then I hated the third one. And then rewatching them all in anticipation of the fourth, or no, maybe it was after watching the fourth and then rewatching them all. Like, I came to appreciate the third movie. I don't hate it. I don't love it. I still think it's badly written. I think the dialogue sucks. But I think it's not a bad movie. And I feel like the fourth one is like the one that really clinches all the emotionality of the series. So it's interesting to me to see someone still putting the second one on their favorites after the fourth one's out. I also need to note the only two manga listed here. The Bride Was a Boy, which is a great manga that I've recommended before because it's about a trans girl who gets married and just talks about the whole experience of what all that was like. And it's fucking adorable. And then Nichijou, which is hilarious. And if you've only ever seen the Nichijou anime, I do recommend the manga. It's a totally different vibe, but equally funny. So, yeah, pretty good Mal profile here, Insight Zoidberg. To the people watching the stream right now, because somebody asked me, what is this stream about? This is a rant request stream. So everybody who pays me $5 or more on patreon.com/goldenwitchfire gets to request a rant every single month that they pay. So, so like right now, everybody who gave me $5 and submitted a rant request via DM on Patreon in July is having their rant done right now. Anybody who signs up in August will have their rant done at the end of August, and it pretty much works this way month after month. You DM me, tell me what you want me to rant about. I tell you if I can rant about it. Basically, if I haven't seen a movie, I'm not going to watch a movie to rant about it. So I'll tell you whether I can do the thing. Most people just want me to rant about their favorites list, which is always fun. Aside from that, I will rant about whatever you want for super chats. If you don't want to go all the way to Patreon and make a commitment to paying me every month, you can just do it one time right here in YouTube, and I'll get to it after I'm done with the Patreon rant requests. But yeah, I'm pretty much always open through any means. If you send me $5 at a rant request, I'll do it. It doesn't matter where or how. It just costs $5 to get me to rant about something. All right, next up is a request from Lux. Hi, this is my rant request for this month. What I'd like you to rant about is media conservation, especially niche media like anime and manga. For instance, I recently got the Faust light novel collections for pretty expensive, and it dawned on me that in a few years or decades, no more physical copies of those books may be around. I know that the Faust books are entirely available in the Internet Archive, but with the recent lawsuit against the archive, many such older niche media is basically on the brink of being semi-lost. I'd really like to hear your perspective on this topic. So, I like media preservation. I want everything to be preserved because I like the idea that I'm going to get to consume it. I think that we are all very precious about art in particular that has been released, like completed and released, which is funny because so much more art isn't. Like, there's so much stuff that makes it close or like gets to a form where it's like more like let me put it another way. There's a lot of half-finished stories that are substantially better than a lot of finished stories, but no one will ever miss the half-finished stories. But they will miss the finished stories when they're gone, just because they got to see them and then lost them. It's like that sensation of loss that makes people feel like they need to preserve the media, and I get that, but there's just so much of it. And like, I'm thinking about history, right? Like, historians all wish that there was a lot more history actually preserved, but there's not, and there's not going to be. Like, the hard drives are going to fail, the world's going to flood, like, there's just going to come a time where stuff's just going to be gone, or nobody's going to fucking care. Like, that's the biggest thing that's going to kill a lot of this stuff, is like, there's going to come a time for every piece of art where just no one's alive to care anymore, where no one's carrying on the legacy, no one gives a shit, it's just over. The time in the sun for that thing is over. It's really hard to do that with something like the pyramids. They really wanted you to fucking remember them. They wanted you to remember as long as fucking humanly possible. Those pyramids won't be around forever, goddammit. But, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, if you really want your art to be preserved, make a fucking pyramid. Otherwise, don't count on anyone to give enough of a shit for long enough to keep that thing around. Somebody's just gonna burn it for fucking firewood eventually. So, I don't try to be precious about it. I think preservation is nice. I think with stuff like Faust, for instance, Gary always with $2 says waiting till the end is leaving money on the table. You might be right. I don't think it's going to be that long until the end. So we'll get to if there were rant requests coming in, they'd be making up the back half of the stream. But mostly I'm just trying to get the Patreons taken care of, They're the people they're the people who keep the lights on in the studio that is my brain. So, always appreciative of these people. But yeah, I'm thinking about the Faust books because I own them, the 2 English copies of Faust. But I'm still sad about the fact that that's all that exists. Faust was a Japanese magazine that was publishing quarterly for a few years, and all the cool light novel authors wrote for it. So there's tons of great material that existed in these Faust magazines, of which the very best or most likely to, succeed in the West and introduce people to these authors was compiled into these books by Del Rey that almost nobody bought. So, in fairness, there's, sure, only so many of those books exist, and probably gradually more people will care over time, but probably never enough to reprint the books. And the people who really care are going to find it online. Even if, archive.org or whatever gets taken off, anything that is online is going to keep getting back online until, again, no one cares. The only reason to think that Faust would disappear would be that no one's asking for it or no one's holding on to it. In that case, will anyone really care that it disappears? Probably not. So I guess I'm trying to say that we lose a lot more media than we think. Because we're not thinking about the media we've lost. But yeah, I've got 5 more Patreon rants, so yeah, I'll be getting to the super chats fairly soon. Alright, Kudere-kun, the next one. Kudere-kun here, think you could rant about the argument that maybe live-action media should be phased out and entirely replaced with animation for various ethical reasons, like not needing to ever use child actors or real animals or do dangerous stunts. And then they wrote a short blog post on the subject, which you can find on the Mithrander Alorin blog. This is an interesting question. This came up with me and my friends recently because we were talking about how, when you make a film that requires you to shut down a whole city and spend $200,000 on sets and inconveniencing all these people and stuff, there is some level of ethical quandary there. It's maybe it would be more responsible to just do this in CGI and not put people in danger, not put your whole film at risk based on the weather, or again, have to shut a city block off or whatever and make a bunch of people fucking upset. It's just there's so much that goes into doing live action photography and filming that, if you can fake a lot of that, then it is just gonna be better for everyone involved in the long run. And some people will be upset who can really tell the difference, but not enough that it's worth worrying about those people, and they're in the minority. Most shit is mostly CGI now. I'm actually amazed how much stuff still isn't CGI. The lengths that filmmakers are still going to get good looking shots of certain things. I'm thinking about The Boys and the whole scene where they run the speedboat into the whale, and they had to a real giant prop whale that they really ran a speedboat into. And it's it's a lot of money and effort for something that is only on screen for a couple of seconds and still doesn't look real. It looks like a speedboat ramming into a giant prop whale and a bunch of blood packs exploding out of it. It looks awesome. It's very fun that they did it. But was there really a need to, As a fan of animation, I don't care how much of it bleeds into my live action film. I do think there's a lot of I think the main reason animation has never caught on to a greater degree is that most people can't suspend their disbelief as much. Like, the average person watches one of these CGI movies and actually really can't tell. They actually just do think it looks real enough to trick their brain for them to go, whoa. Or even if it doesn't, as long as it is the realest looking thing they've seen, that is impressive in and of itself, regardless of how real that is. So, you know, I'm not like that. I don't want everything to be like animated but photorealistic. I'd prefer if everything was abstract and everything was more anime, but that's never going to catch on. But I do think that there is something to be said about the idea that animation is like just more responsible than trying to make film. All right, next rant. Muse of Salzburg says, good to be back. You hear talk of anime that are timeless all the time, but what about the opposite? Are there shows you've seen that were so couched in that moment in history that they seemed outstanding at the time, but then quickly became less and less relevant? To what extent do you feel a show even can age? Can a show once considered a masterpiece ever fall to the ranks of barely worth watching? I've heard people say this about Haruhi, which I don't really agree with, but I get where they're coming from. Yeah, I feel you on that. Like, Haruhi, I would say that's more true of Lucky Star than Haruhi, where Lucky Star feels incredibly time and place, and like rewatching it for the sake of Anime Alphabet, I was kind of stunned by how many jokes in it I just think will not make sense or land with people eventually. And like for me, I watched the show for the first time and considered it like a 6 out of 10. I watched it again with friends and drunk and with reference guides open and eventually got up to like a 9. But that was like me putting an effort into understanding it and finding it funny. And like returning to it as somebody who's already made that effort and now does understand the show, but is just taking it at face value of like, okay, yeah, I get the jokes, but are they funny? Do they hold up? And yeah, a lot of it felt like so time and place and so contextual that I couldn't imagine trying to explain it. Like, I guess what I mean to say is in 2007, I understood half of it, and the other half was stuff I had to look up. Somebody watching the show now would have to look up everything, because none of it is relevant anymore. It's still probably funny and cute and endearing, and like the stuff that's more broad, like just stuff that's just like commentary on human nature, or the way that like people naturally act, will be different. But I wouldn't even be surprised if like a lot of the snacks they discuss in the show are like not popular anymore. You know, like they probably aren't even eating the same food that teenage girls are eating in Japan at this point because it's been 15 years. So it's just like, yeah. Whereas Haruhi, like, sure, it was making reference to like stuff that was, I guess, Haruhi feels very of its time because everything ripped it off immediately. But if you watch it divorced from where it was in time, it makes just as much sense. It's about aliens, time travelers, and espers. Those are old sci-fi ideas. So to me, Haruhi was not like a 2003 light novel. It was a amalgamation of all of sci-fi history. And the only reason it feels like 2003 is that after it came out, the rest of 2003 was people copying Haruhi. But like Lucky Star, on the other hand, is about life in 2007 for an anime fan. And like, it's not documentarian the way that like Genshiken was, where like you could still go back and watch Genshiken, and even if it's not relevant anymore, it'll still make sense because the story is literally explaining the jokes to you. Like, it's telling you why the characters are acting the way they are and how they think. Lucky Star is just like making jokes and then expecting you to get them, and if you don't get them, you're just gonna be like, I don't know what's happening. So that's a very like time and place sort of thing. I think there's been tons and tons of shows that were like beloved in the moment and then just fell off immediately. Erased is a great example of that, as like a show that was just so fucking hyped the season it was coming out. It was like the 10th best rated show on my anime list and like all this shit, and then like so many people were disappointed with the ending, and I rushed to capitalize on that and made a video that was extremely controversial, where I was just like ragging on it. But it did end up being a show that like was super hyped while it was airing, and then people were let down by the ending, and then it just kind of vaporized. Like by a year later, no one fucking cared about Erased anymore. There's plenty of shows like that come out. Every year there's a few like flash in the pan big hit shows that just vaporize. Some of them come back. Then you're like, it's when a show comes back for a second season that I realize it's something to take seriously, that it's not like just gonna disappear and be a nothing burger. But yeah, like I think there's been tons and tons of anime that are very much of their time. Most of them are hard to kind of remember. Like I'm thinking about, especially otaku oriented one, like stuff that's like Lucky Star but worse. That's a whole category of media of forgotten stuff that nobody's going to go back and check up on. So, yeah. All right. Next rant. Well, let me make sure I answered all of the questions that were in that rant. To what extent do you feel a show even can age? Definitely. It really depends on the show. I mean, Mobile Suit Gundam is as watchable now as it was in 1979. It doesn't feel like dated or weird. There's technology that would be done differently if it was actually done, but nothing that feels like outlandishly outdated. So, but meanwhile, like I said, Lucky Star is not even close to that age and feels, it doesn't feel older, it just feels less capable of being watched later. Anyway, next rant. Tom Chukas says, can you rant/give your thoughts on My Hero Academia, please? Or at least what you've currently experienced with it. Or more specifically, how it compares to its contemporaries, such as Demon Slayer, Black Clover, Jujutsu Kaisen, etc. So, none of these am I hyper experienced with. I've seen the first season of My Hero Academia. I remember skipping and watching the first episode of like season 3 or 4 and feeling like nothing had changed significantly enough about the characters or the situation for me to have missed anything. Like, I didn't contextually understand what they were talking about, but everyone was acting the same and doing the same kind of stuff that they've been doing in season 1. So that made me less interested in the show because it felt like it wasn't going to change or like evolve in a way that would interest me. I'm not super, like, even though right now I'm, like, probably the most into superheroes I've ever been because I've been hyper into the MCU and, like, reading more comics and stuff, superheroes have never been, like, innately my aesthetic. I'm not, like, drawn to superhero stories specifically. So My Hero Academia, like, its aesthetic did not draw me to it in the way that, like, Naruto's did because I've always loved ninjas, so it's, like, when it comes to shonen manga, there really is like some level of like just base intrigue that has to get you in. You have to like have a childish wonderment for that type of thing, and superheroes aren't that for me. Whereas my brother Victor, like superheroes are an aesthetic he super appreciates, even though he was never big into comics. So like shows like My Hero or Tiger and Bunny aesthetically like clicked with him right away in a way they didn't for me. But to compare it to its contemporaries, Demon Slayer, I've seen like 5 episodes of, and I don't feel anything when I watch it. Like, My Hero had moments in the first and third episodes that made me tear up. Like, I think it had really well written, like, character motivations and backstory, and it set up its characters well. It just ends up kind of doing generic shonen stuff from there. Demon Slayer just, I didn't care. I just didn't get what was interesting or special about any of the characters or their stories. It was really hard for me to empathize. So I struggled with that one. Black Clover, I've only seen the first episode of. I have heard good things about it from Shabes of Caribou Coon, but I've not seen it, so I can't really say much. Jujutsu Kaisen, I've seen like 13 episodes of. That one is intriguing in the way that it feels like the author just kind of is drawing cool shit and making it up as they go. And like, I really was not enjoying the first like 8 episodes. The whole first like arc I thought sucked. And then it got into like the Chunin exam ripoff arc, and it got way cooler because it started just being like neat fights and fun banter. So I could see myself watching more of Jujutsu Kaisen. It would be interesting to see if it like stays in the ground of just feeling like a guy drawing cool shit and making it up as he goes, or if it develops more of like an actual story. But yeah, My Hero is the one out of those that I like the most. The one that, like, what I've seen impressed me, and I could see myself watching more, even though I haven't, only because the story doesn't seem like it's going to compel me all the way through. Whereas, like, Demon Slayer, I felt nothing. Black Clover just seemed really generic. And Jujutsu Kaisen is really generic, but at least has things that make it cool. Alright, that's all for that one. The next rant is from Space, who says, rant about schizophrenia versus autism. They are at war. I know these things. I am schizophrenic, by the way. So there's a guy called J-Reg who does similar types of videos to my, like, neurotyping chart and like the videos I've done, like talking about autism and schizophrenia. I used to talk about these subjects a lot more. There was a period where I was just like super fascinated with autistic and schizophrenic people on the internet in particular, because these are categories of people who have a lot of difficulty communicating. And in the case of autistic people, it's like not understanding like what is the appropriate response to something, or like what is a socially acceptable response, or what an expected response might be a better way of putting it. Just not knowing what people are expecting from them or how they're supposed to react. Whereas with schizophrenia, it's more like too many options. Like you've got a bunch of reactions in mind and you're not sure which ones make sense. At least that's the experience I've had, like, talking to these people online. Like, so, like, because I've been so fascinated with them, I've done a lot of study and I've done a lot of talk about these subjects, but someone will always get offended because of the loose and metaphorical way that I talk about mental illness, because I really think that labeling stuff rigidly is a huge problem. Like, the fact that we will talk about these things like they are one thing, as opposed to like a nebulous spectrum of loosely related things. Like, no two people have the exact same mental illness. You have slightly different takes on something that is similar enough that will put them into a category so that it's easier to prescribe you something that might work, but like nobody is autistic or schizophrenic. You are labeled that for categorical purposes to describe you in comparison to other people. It's not like a solid state of it only exists in as much as other people exist to compare it to. Like you can't have autism without having neurotypical. Or you can't have neurotypical with having something to compare it to. So like, yeah, it's all spectrums, it's all weird labeling. And so when we say things like autism is different from schizophrenia or they're at war, like J-Reg had a video where he posited like how these two things could be opposites, but also how you can be both and be just schizo-autistic, which is a lot of my audience. So I relate and I understand. I've maintained that my autism was cured by MDMA, and that that now I've just got the I'm not even really that schizo anymore, because I've quieted the voices in my head and told them all to work together. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm basically a normie. But J-Reg is continuing the work on deconstructing the schizo-autistic spectrum, and I would recommend his videos to go deeper down that thought path. But yeah, like where I'm at is just sort of like, I think it can be helpful to recognize that like your patterns of behavior exist in other people for the sake of feeling like some sense of community or people that you can like take advice from or like learn coping mechanisms from and stuff like that. But I also think that like describing yourself with a hardline label is just like reductionist and like minimizing yourself to one part of what you are, and usually not healthy. Not healthy to do that, I think. Yeah, so that's Schizo versus Autism. All right, one more rant from Patreon, I think. Darker Than Black says, rant option 1. There's 3 options here, okay. Let me read through. I haven't seen Dark Side Blues, I don't think. So, okay, we're going to go with rant option 1. Top 5 video games or video game franchises and why. Number 1, the Souls series. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, Elden Ring gets thrown in here. We'll say FromSoft action RPGs. I love the dense, haunting worlds of these games. The art design is fucking incredible. The combat mechanics just are so satisfying and feel good in the hands. Like, the control scheme that Souls invented is ingenious, and it's crazy how much it's like already permeated to the point that like I don't even think it's recognizable as just a Souls control scheme anymore. It's just like a way action games are now. But yeah, the whole like L and R to dodge or to block and attack, and then circle to dodge is just fucking ingenious. And I sucked at the games for a long time and was mostly just obsessed with them because of the art design and level design, and like just fucking losing my mind at like watching people show off how interconnected it all was and stuff. But once I found out that the games are actually easy, that was when I got really into them. To realize that I can actually play these games and they're not hard. That was a huge advantage. So yeah, the Souls series, particularly like right now Elden Ring, even though I'm like not even halfway through actually beating that game, is probably my favorite game of all time. I just can't imagine loving another game more. It was like everything I wanted to love about Breath of the Wild and everything I already loved about Sekiro and Dark Souls, like just combined into a perfect game. No, not a perfect game. Just the best game, but I think that it can be made way better. So like the most exciting thing to me about Elden Ring is that it's a blueprint for an even more perfect game. And that's what I'm most excited about. At least I hope that's the case. They sold 13 fucking million copies, so I'm sure they can afford to make another one. But yeah, I love that. Legend of Zelda, I've been a huge fan since I was a kid. It's another game that's mostly about running around a beautiful world and smacking stuff with a big stick and listening to great music. A lot of nostalgia for Ocarina of Time in particular, and the Wind Waker. And I do like Breath of the Wild. I'll probably play through that again sometime. Mass Effect. Best story, best world building, most interesting universe in a game that I've played. Probably my, like, in terms of sci-fi universes that I've actually spent some time, like, thinking about, and where I could, like, actually start lore dumping about the different races and stuff like that, Mass Effect is probably the... I'm not an expert. I'm not going to act like I know everything in it, because I haven't replayed through all 3 games ever, actually. But what I do know of it, I'm obsessed with. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the Mass Effect trilogy and its whole universe. That's 3, right? So we got Souls, Zelda. Oh, Phantasy Star Online. Spent a massive amount of time playing episodes 1 and 2 on the GameCube with my brothers and our friends. It's just the most fun, like, mindless arcade experience. It's basically... It's an MMORPG, but it's more like Gauntlet in that it's, like, just running around kind of mindlessly looting and collecting. Or Diablo. Like, but in 3D and with cool sci-fi aesthetics and great music. That is definitely, like, a comfort blanket game for me. That I could just like do all day, and feel good and just be in a light lull. So yeah, Phantasy Star Online 2 is also great. It's not quite the same though because it doesn't have couch co-op, and that's like the real magic of PSO for me. So that's 4, and then Mass Effect, Zelda, Souls. And let me look over at my game. Oh, Metroid. Metroid, love Metroid. Fucking Zero Mission, great game. Metroid 2, great game. Super Metroid, what? Amazing. Metroid Fusion, also really great game. Metroid Prime, perfect. Godly. Incredible. One of my favorite games. Possibly, definitely top 5. I mean, I just named all of my top 5 favorite franchises, so of course it would be. Of course, at least one game from each of those is in my top 5 favorite games. That only makes sense. Except that my top 6 favorite games is just the Souls games. And then you have to start after that. That's not including Dark Souls 2. And I think that completes the Patreon rants. Let me make sure. Let me reload the page. Because it looks like I got a couple more messages, but they might have shown up today. And therefore, I'm not... No, it doesn't look like it. I've got 2 notifications, but no unread messages. Patreon. Oh, what's going on? Okay, there we go. Now the notifications have gone away. All right, so that's it for the Patreon rants. And there was one more super chat. Here we go. Aiden Goldrear with 30 shekels said, "Hi Trixie, a longtime fan from Israel here. I would love for you to rant about your experience with cult classic Japanese films, and if you haven't seen any remarkable ones, check out Taste of Tea." I have not seen Taste of Tea, but what I have seen, and I will aim this camera... Hold on, let me make sure I can see what I'm doing. Aim this camera up at this poster I have here of Gozu, which is a Takashi Miike film that I'm a big fan of. Takashi Miike is probably like the best known cult classic cinema director. Kira Kurosawa doesn't count as cult classic, but or Yasujiro Ozu, but like in terms of cult heroes, Takashi Miike's films, he made a lot of them for the Yakuza. They're low budget, dirty, grimy, fucking filthy films full of fucked up shit happening. And a lot of them are really about pushing the envelope on being like edgy or crazy. But Gozu is that too, but it's really more about just being fucking surreal and absurd and not making any sense until it suddenly makes way too much sense. And yeah, it's I don't want to spoil anything about Gozu. You should just watch it because it's a time. Visitor Q is also completely nuts. Happiness of the Katakuris, Dead or Alive. Those are like all the Takashi Miike films that I can remember seeing. Audition is also a famous one. All those movies are nuts, but Gozu's my favorite. The ending is just fucking bonkers. And then I also am a big fan of Electric Dragon 80,000 Volts. I don't remember the name of the director. He did a bunch of like crazy avant-garde like punk cinema. But in particular, that movie has just nuts noise guitar soundtrack. Like the director of the movie like played guitar, like formed a band to make some like insane noise punk for that movie. And it's fucking great. It's just really solid shit. All right. I believe I have read all the rants. I've done all the Patreon rants. I've done all the live stream rants. So we're going to be wrapping this up pretty soon. I'm going to be starting off this stream. Pretty much as soon as I hit end stream, I'm going to go then watch the completed first vlog of August and then make it public. So yeah, if you didn't know, I'm ranting. I'm doing a live stream, not a live stream. I'm doing a vlog or video every single day all month. Wow, my fucking brain got twisted up in that. Oh, I have another super chat. Anton Nielsen with $5 says, "Have I heard of the Trails Not Tales series, a Falcom JRPG series with one big narrative? I'm 7 games deep and it's incredible. You may like it." Anton Nielsen, I don't know if you're the same person who asked about this on Patreon. I did already rant about... Oh, wait, was that a Patreon rant or a previous episode's super chat? I ranted about this earlier. I think it was me catching up on super chats from the Moe and Guro, but I'll answer you again since you're here. I only know about the Trails series. I've heard a lot of good things. People talk about how the NPCs all have like their own time clocks that they exist on, and you have to like keep track of all this crazy stuff. To me, it's always sounded really complicated and kind of foreboding. I've also never been a PSP gamer, so although I've played Vita emulators on the PC, so it's not like I'm averse to playing a PSP game, but like that whole graphical aesthetic and style of play is kind of alien to me. Like it's just not a type of game I've played much of. So when I look at footage of Trills, I'm like, I don't really understand what I'm looking at. I don't know what the play will feel like. So I'd be interested to give it a shot and see how it feels and see if I like it. But everyone who talks about it just kind of makes it sound really complicated. And as I was saying earlier, I tend to like games where you run around and hit stuff with a big stick, and don't really think or have to like keep track of shit, you know. So yeah, I am interested, but not so interested. I've gone ahead and tried to actually play them. Also, 7 games sounds intimidating. I didn't even know there were that many. All right, I'm going to wrap this stream up, especially because my video's getting choppy again. Again, Vlogust, video a day, all month. Huge announcement coming at the end of the month when I make the very last video. So keep your fucking ears and eyes open for when that finally happens. But in the meantime, enjoy the first vlog that's going to drop not too long after I end this stream. Thanks again for watching. Become a patron at patreon.com/goldenwitchfire and get your rant in before the end of next month. See you, everybody.